Mother Bear climbed the hospital bed and cuddled a post-op baby. What happened next was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning air felt heavy inside Pine Valley Children's Hospital as Dr. Cassandra Vale pushed through the glass doors of the pediatric recovery wing. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago, but she clutched the paper cup anyway, finding comfort in its familiar weight. The hospital sat nestled against the Cascade Mountains, where thick forests pressed against the building's edges like nature was trying to reclaim what belonged to it. Cassandra had been working double shifts for 3 weeks straight. The recent surge of cases had left the small hospital understaffed, and as the head of pediatric surgery, she felt the weight of every child's recovery on her shoulders. She paused at the nurse's station, scanning the patient charts that never seemed to shrink. "Dr. Vale, room 314 is asking for you again," said Nurse Riley Chen, her voice carrying that particular exhaustion that came from working through the night. "Little Marcus Thompson. His surgery went well yesterday, but he's been restless, keeps crying for his mama." Cassandra nodded, her heart tightening. Marcus was only 18 months old, barely more than a baby. His parents, Sophia and David Thompson, were young and scared. They'd driven 3 hours from their remote mountain town when Marcus developed complications from what should have been a simple hernia repair. The surgery had gone smoothly, but the recovery was proving difficult for such a small child. "I'll check on him in a moment," Cassandra said, flipping through Marcus's chart. His vitals were stable, but she could read between the lines of the nurse's notes. The baby was struggling emotionally, crying for comfort that medical procedures couldn't provide. As she walked down the hallway, past the colorful murals painted by local school children, something felt different. The usual hum of activity seemed muted, almost expectant. Through the large windows that lined the corridor, she could see the forest that surrounded the hospital. The trees swayed gently in the morning breeze, their branches reaching toward the building as if trying to peek inside. Outside, room 314, she heard it. Not the sharp cries she'd expected from Marcus, but something softer, almost peaceful. She frowned, checking her watch. It was 6:47 a.m., still early enough that most patients would be sleeping. She pressed her ear to the door, listening carefully. The sound came again, a low, rumbling noise that seemed to vibrate through the walls. It wasn't mechanical, like the hospital's heating system or medical equipment. It was organic, alive, soothing in a way that made her pause with her hand on the door handle. Dr. Vale had heard many sounds in her 15 years of pediatric medicine. She knew the difference between a child's cry of pain and one of fear, between the beep of a heart monitor running normally and one signaling distress. But this sound was unlike anything she'd encountered in a hospital setting. She turned the handle slowly, expecting to find Marcus in his crib, perhaps making the sounds children sometimes made when they were dreaming. Instead, she found herself frozen in the doorway, her medical training warring with what her eyes were telling her. The morning sunlight streamed through the open window, casting golden rays across a scene that defied all logic. Marcus lay in his hospital crib, but he wasn't alone. Curled around the tiny boy, her massive form somehow fitting into the space with impossible gentleness, was a brown bear. The bear's fur was thick and glossy, catching the light as her chest rose and fell with deep, steady breaths. One enormous paw rested protectively near Marcus's head, while the other tucked carefully against her own body to avoid the medical equipment surrounding the crib. The baby's small hand was tangled in the bear's fur, his face peaceful for the first time since his surgery. Cassandra's medical bag dropped from her numb fingers, hitting the floor with a soft thud. The bear's head lifted slightly, golden eyes meeting hers across the room. There was no aggression in that gaze, no threat. Instead, there was something that looked almost like recognition, as if the bear understood exactly what Cassandra was feeling in this impossible moment. The baby stirred, making a soft cooing sound, and the bear's attention immediately returned to him. She made that low rumbling noise again, and Marcus settled back into sleep, his breathing deep and even. The monitors beside his bed showed stable vitals, better than they'd been since his surgery. Cassandra stood motionless, her mind racing through protocols that had never covered a situation like this. She should call security, alert the staff, follow procedures designed to protect patients from wild animals. But looking at Marcus's peaceful face, seeing the gentle way the bear watched over him, she found herself unable to move. How had a wild bear gotten into the hospital? The window was open, but they were on the 3rd floor. The forest was close, but not that close. And why was she acting like this, protecting a human child instead of seeing him as prey or threat? As if sensing her thoughts, the bear looked at her again. This time, Cassandra noticed something in those golden eyes that made her breath catch. Pain. Loss. A grief so deep it seemed to echo through the quiet room. The bear was a mother. Somehow Cassandra knew this with absolute certainty. This wasn't just a wild animal that had wandered into the hospital. This was a mother who had lost something precious, and in Marcus she had found something that called to the deepest parts of her maternal instincts. Cassandra took a careful step into the room, her hands raised peacefully. The bear watched her approach but didn't move from her protective position around Marcus. Instead, she seemed to study Cassandra, taking in her white coat, her careful movements, perhaps recognizing her as someone who belonged in this place of healing. "Easy, Mama," Cassandra whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm not going to hurt him. Or you." The bear's ears twitched at the sound of her voice, but she remained calm. Marcus shifted in his sleep, one tiny fist pressing against the bear's thick fur. The sight was so tender, so completely at odds with everything Cassandra had been taught about wild animals, that she felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She needed to think, to figure out what to do next. But as she stood in that sun-drenched room, watching a wild bear comfort a post-surgical baby with more gentleness than some humans could manage, Cassandra realized that everything she thought she knew about the boundaries between species, between wild and domestic, between possible and impossible, was about to change forever. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft beeping of Marcus's monitors and the bear's gentle breathing. Cassandra found herself studying the animal more closely, noticing details that her initial shock had missed. The bear's fur was matted in some places, with small twigs and leaves caught in the thick coat. There were scratches along her muzzle, fresh enough to still show pink beneath the dark fur. Her paws, massive as they were, bore cuts and scrapes that spoke of desperate searching through rough terrain. This wasn't just any bear who had wandered into the hospital. This was a mother who had been through something traumatic, something that had driven her to seek comfort in the most unlikely of places. Cassandra's medical training kicked in, and she began to move slowly around the room, checking Marcus's IV line and monitoring equipment. The bear's eyes followed her every movement, but there was no hostility in her gaze. Instead, there seemed to be an understanding, as if she recognized that Cassandra was there to help the baby, not harm him. "You're protecting him," Cassandra whispered more to herself than to the bear. "But why? What happened to you out there?" As if in response to her question, a sound drifted through the open window. It was faint at first, almost lost in the morning breeze, but it grew stronger. A crying, plaintive call that made the bear's head lift suddenly, her entire body tensing with alertness. The sound came again, clearer this time. It was the cry of a young animal, desperate and afraid. The bear's ears pricked forward, and she made a low whining sound in her throat. For the first time since Cassandra had entered the room, the bear looked conflicted, torn between staying with Marcus and responding to the call from outside. Cassandra's heart began to race as she understood. The bear had a cub out there, somewhere in the forest. A baby of her own who was lost or in danger. That explained the scratches, the matted fur, the desperate look in her eyes. She had been searching for her own child when she found Marcus. The crying came a third time, more urgent now, and the bear began to shift restlessly. Her movement caused Marcus to stir, and the baby's eyes fluttered open. Instead of the fearful crying they had all expected, Marcus looked up at the massive bear above him and smiled. His tiny hand reached up, fingers tangling in the thick fur, and he made a soft cooing sound. The bear looked down at him, her expression impossibly gentle, and nuzzled his cheek with her snout. The tender gesture brought tears to Cassandra's eyes. Here was a mother who had lost her own child, finding solace in comforting another mother's baby. But the calls from outside were becoming more frequent, more desperate. The bear was caught between two powerful instincts: the need to find her missing cub and the overwhelming urge to protect this vulnerable human infant who had somehow captured her maternal heart. Cassandra knew she had to make a decision. She could call security, have the bear tranquilized and removed. It would be the safe thing to do, the protocol thing to do. But looking at Marcus's peaceful face, seeing how much better he looked than he had since his surgery, she couldn't bring herself to break this impossible bond. Instead, she did something that would have horrified her supervisors. She moved to the window and looked out toward the forest, trying to locate the source of the crying. The bear watched her movements with interest, and when Cassandra leaned out the window, the animal made a soft huffing sound that almost sounded like communication. "Your baby is out there," Cassandra said softly, turning back to the bear. "I can hear him. He's scared, and he needs you." The bear's eyes met hers, and for a moment, Cassandra could have sworn she saw understanding there. The animal looked down at Marcus, then back at the window, her distress obvious. She wanted to go to her cub, but she couldn't bear to leave the human baby unprotected. That's when Cassandra made a decision that would change everything. She reached for her phone, but instead of calling security, she dialed the number for Jake Morrison, the hospital's maintenance supervisor. Jake had grown up in these mountains, knew the wildlife better than anyone. If anyone could help in this impossible situation, it would be him. "Jake, I need you to come to room 314 immediately," she said when he answered. "And bring your binoculars. Don't ask questions, just come. And Jake, don't bring anyone else with you." While they waited, Cassandra continued her vigil, watching the bear watch over Marcus. The baby had drifted back to sleep, his breathing steady and peaceful. The bear's presence seemed to have a calming effect on him that no medication could match. The calls from the forest continued, and with each one the bear became more agitated. She would lift her head, listen intently, then look down at Marcus with what could only be described as anguish. She was a mother torn between two children, unable to choose between them. When Jake arrived 10 minutes later, he knocked softly on the door. Cassandra opened it just wide enough to slip out into the hallway, closing it behind her. Jake was a tall, weathered man in his 50s, with the kind of calm presence that came from years of working with his hands and spending time in nature. "Doc, what's going on? You sounded—" He stopped mid-sentence as he caught sight of Cassandra's expression. "What's wrong?" "Jake, I need you to promise me something." What I'm about to show you has to stay between us, at least for now. Can you do that?" He studied her face, seeing the stress and something else, a kind of wonder that he'd never seen in her before. "Doctor, Vale, you're scaring me a little, but yeah, you have my word." Cassandra opened the door slowly, stepping aside so Jake could see into the room. She watched his face as he took in the impossible scene, the massive brown bear curled protectively around the tiny patient, both of them bathed in morning sunlight. Jake's mouth fell open, but to his credit he didn't shout or panic. Instead, he stood perfectly still, his eyes taking in every detail of the scene before him. After a long moment, he whispered, "How long has she been here?" "I found them like this about 20 minutes ago," Cassandra replied quietly. "Jake, listen. Can you hear that?" They both stood silent, and the crying from the forest came again, clear and desperate. Jake's expression changed immediately. "That's a cub," he said. "A young one, probably about 6 months old. He's in distress." "That's her baby," Cassandra said, nodding toward the bear. "She's been searching for him. Look at her paws, her face. She's been through hell trying to find him." Jake was quiet for a long moment, processing the situation. When he spoke again, his voice was filled with a mixture of amazement and concern. "Doc, this is unprecedented. I've been around wildlife my whole life, and I've never seen anything like this. That bear should see the baby as either prey or threat, not something to protect." "But she's not just any bear," Cassandra said. "She's a mother who's lost her child, and somehow Marcus has filled that void for her." As if she had heard them talking about her, the bear looked toward the doorway. Her eyes met Jake's, and he drew in a sharp breath. "My God," he whispered. "She's grieving. I can see it in her eyes." The cub's cries came again, closer this time, and the bear whined softly in response. Marcus stirred at the sound, his little hand tightening in the bear's fur. The bear immediately focused on him, making that low rumbling sound that seemed to calm the baby instantly. "We have to help her," Cassandra said suddenly. "We have to help her find her cub." Jake turned to stare at her. "Doc, are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? We can't just leave a wild bear alone with a patient, even if she is being gentle. And we definitely can't go searching the forest for a lost cub." "Why not?" Cassandra asked, her voice growing stronger with conviction. "Jake, look at Marcus. Look at his monitors. His vitals are better than they've been since his surgery. His breathing is deeper, more relaxed. She's helping him heal." Jake looked at the monitors and his eyebrows rose. She was right. The baby's heart rate was steady and strong, his oxygen levels perfect. There was no sign of distress or fear. "And look at her," Cassandra continued. "She's not going to hurt him. She's protecting him like he's her own cub. But she's torn apart inside because her real baby is out there, scared and alone." The cub's crying intensified, and this time it seemed to be coming from directly below them. The bear became more agitated, shifting position but still careful not to disturb Marcus or the medical equipment around him. "He's close," Jake said, moving to the window. He pulled out his binoculars and scanned the area below. "There," he said after a moment. "I can see him. He's caught in some kind of debris pile near the service road. Looks like construction waste that didn't get cleaned up properly." Cassandra joined him at the window, and through the binoculars she could see a small brown shape struggling against what looked like twisted metal and plastic sheeting. The cub was trapped, unable to free himself, crying for his mother who couldn't reach him from where she was. "We have to do something," Cassandra said. "She saved Marcus in her own way. Now we need to save her baby." Jake was quiet for a long moment, weighing the risks and the impossibility of the situation. Finally, he looked at the bear, still curled protectively around the human baby, and made his decision. "I'll go," he said. "I can get down there with some tools, free the cub. But Doc, you have to stay here with them. If anything goes wrong, if she gets aggressive, you need to be ready to call for help." Cassandra nodded, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. What if she tries to follow you? What if she leaves Marcus to go to her cub? "Then we'll deal with that when it happens," Jake said. "But my gut tells me she won't leave him. Not until she knows her own baby is safe." As Jake prepared to leave, gathering tools from his maintenance cart, the bear seemed to sense that something was happening. She looked between them with those intelligent golden eyes, and Cassandra could have sworn she understood what they were planning. "We're going to help," Cassandra said softly to the bear. "We're going to bring your baby back to you." The bear made a soft chuffing sound, almost like a sigh of relief. She settled more comfortably around Marcus, as if she understood that help was coming, and she could afford to wait just a little longer. Jake headed for the service elevator, leaving Cassandra alone with the most unusual patience she'd ever had. As she watched the bear gently nuzzle Marcus's cheek, she realized that this morning had already changed her understanding of medicine, of compassion, and of the connections that could exist between species. But she had no idea that the biggest surprises were yet to come. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. Cassandra found herself checking her watch every few seconds, then forcing herself to focus on Marcus's vital signs. The baby remained peacefully asleep, his small chest rising and falling in perfect rhythm. The bear's breathing had synchronized with his, creating a harmony that seemed to fill the room with an almost sacred calm. From outside, the cub's cries had become more frequent and desperate. Each time the sound drifted through the window, the mother bear's ears would perk up and her muscles would tense slightly. But she never moved from her protective position around Marcus. It was as if she had made a conscious decision to trust the humans to help her baby while she continued to care for theirs. Cassandra had positioned herself in a chair beside the crib, close enough to monitor both patients but far enough away to avoid crowding the bear. She found herself talking softly, more to ease her own nerves than anything else. "You know, in all my years of medicine, I've never seen anything like this," she murmured. "The way you're taking care of him. It's beautiful. He's been so restless since his surgery, crying for his parents. But look at him now." The bear's golden eyes shifted to her, and Cassandra felt that strange sense of communication again, as if the animal understood not just her words, but the emotion behind them. "His parents are going to be back soon," Cassandra continued. "Sophia and David. They're good people, but they're scared. They're young, and this is their first baby. They don't know what to do when he cries like that. But you know exactly what he needs." A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Cassandra's heart leaped, expecting Jake to return with news about the cub. Instead, she heard Nurse Riley's voice. "Doctor, Vale? The Thompsons are here. They want to see Marcus before visiting hours officially start. Should I tell them to wait?" Cassandra's blood ran cold. Sophia and David Thompson, Marcus's parents, were outside the door. They had no idea that their baby was currently being cared for by a 400-pound wild bear. The thought of their reaction made her stomach lurch. Riley, can you give me just a few more minutes? I'm still doing my morning examination." "Of course, doctor, but they seem pretty anxious. The father keeps asking if everything's okay." Cassandra looked at the bear, who had lifted her head at the sound of voices. The animal's eyes were alert, watchful, but still calm. She seemed to understand that new people were nearby, but she showed no signs of aggression or fear. "Riley, I need you to do something for me," Cassandra called through the door. Take the Thompsons to the family lounge. Get them some coffee, maybe some breakfast from the cafeteria. Tell them I'll be with them in about 15 minutes. Is everything all right, Doctor? You sound a little. Everything's fine. Just trust me on this, okay? There was a pause, then Riley's footsteps retreating down the hallway. Cassandra let out a shaky breath and turned back to the bear. We have a problem, she said softly. Marcus's parents are here. They're going to want to see him, and I don't know how to explain this. The bear seemed to sense her distress. She made a low, rumbling sound that was almost comforting, then very gently began to shift her position. Cassandra watched in amazement as the massive animal carefully extracted herself from around Marcus without disturbing him or any of the medical equipment. The bear moved with impossible grace, each movement deliberate and controlled. She positioned herself beside the crib instead of around it, one paw resting lightly on the edge of the mattress. Marcus stirred slightly at the loss of her warmth, but didn't wake. You understand, don't you? Cassandra whispered. You know they're his parents. Before the bear could respond, if such a thing were even possible, Cassandra's phone buzzed with a text from Jake. She read it quickly and her face went pale. Problem. Cub is hurt. Looks like a broken leg. Going to need medical attention. Can you come down here? Cassandra stared at the message, her mind racing. The cub was injured, which explained why he couldn't free himself from the debris. But she couldn't leave Marcus alone with the bear, not with his parents likely to arrive at any moment. And she certainly couldn't bring a wild bear down to the service area. She looked at the bear, who was watching her with those intelligent eyes. Your baby is hurt, she said softly. Jake found him, but he's injured. He needs help. The bear's reaction was immediate and heartbreaking. She let out a low whine, her entire body tensing with the urge to go to her cub. She looked toward the window, then back at Marcus, then at Cassandra. The conflict in her eyes was unmistakable. That's when Cassandra made another decision that would have horrified her colleagues. She grabbed her medical bag and headed for the door. I'll be right back, she told the bear. Watch over him. His parents are coming, but they don't know about you yet. I need to help your baby first. She slipped out of the room and practically ran to the service elevator. Her heart was pounding as she descended to the ground floor and made her way to the service area where Jake was waiting. What she found there made her gasp. Jake was kneeling beside a small pile of construction debris. His hands held out peacefully toward a tiny bear cub who was indeed trapped beneath a twisted piece of metal sheeting. The cub was about the size of a medium dog, with fur that was a lighter brown than his mother's. His left rear leg was bent at an unnatural angle, and he was whimpering softly with pain and fear. He's been here for a while, Jake said quietly. Probably since last night. The leg is definitely broken, and he's dehydrated, but he's alive, and he's fighting. Cassandra set down her medical bag and assessed the situation. The cub was watching her with dark eyes that reminded her of his mother's, but there was fear there too. He was just a baby, trapped and hurt and separated from the only security he knew. Can we free him without making the injury worse? She asked. I think so. The metal is bent in a way that's pinning his leg, but if we can lift it just a few inches, he should be able to pull free. Working together, they carefully lifted the debris while Cassandra supported the cub's injured leg. The little animal whimpered, but didn't try to bite or scratch them. It was as if he understood they were trying to help. Once free, Cassandra was able to examine the cub more closely. The break was clean but needed immediate attention. The cub was also showing signs of dehydration and exhaustion. Jake, I need to get him to the veterinary clinic in town, she said. But first, I need to bring him upstairs. His mother needs to see that he's okay. Jake stared at her. "Doc, you can't bring a wild bear cub into the hospital. There are protocols, health regulations. Jake, his mother is upstairs right now, caring for a human baby with more gentleness than I've ever seen from any animal. She saved Marcus's life in her own way. The least we can do is let her see that her own baby is safe." Before Jake could protest further, Cassandra had wrapped the cub gently in a blanket from her bag. The little animal was weak enough that he didn't struggle, just looked up at her with those dark eyes that seemed far too old for such a young creature. They took the service elevator back up to the 3rd floor, and Cassandra's heart was racing as they approached room 314. What would they find? Had the bear left to search for her cub? Had Marcus's parents arrived and found the impossible scene? She pushed open the door carefully, and her breath caught. The bear was still there, but she wasn't alone. Sophia and David Thompson were standing frozen in the doorway, their faces white with shock and terror. Sophia was pressed against her husband's chest, her hand over her mouth to muffle a scream. David had his arms around his wife, but his eyes were locked on the massive bear who was curled protectively around their baby son. "Don't move," Cassandra said quickly, stepping into the room with the cub in her arms. "She's not going to hurt him. She's been protecting him." That's a bear," Sophia whispered, her voice shaking. "There's a bear with my baby." The mother bear's head snapped up when she saw Cassandra enter with the cub. Her eyes immediately focused on the small bundle in Cassandra's arms, and she let out a sound that was part whine, part cry of relief. She started to move toward them, then stopped, looking back at Marcus. "It's okay," Cassandra said softly, addressing both the bear and the terrified parents. "Your baby is safe. Both of your babies are safe." She knelt beside the crib, still holding the injured cub, and the mother bear's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. She pressed her nose against the blanket, sniffing her baby, making soft sounds of relief and joy. The cub responded weakly, nuzzling against his mother's snout. Sophia and David watched in stunned silence as the reunion unfolded. The bear was completely focused on her cub, but she never moved away from Marcus. It was as if she was determined to protect both babies at once. "I don't understand," David said finally, his voice barely a whisper. "What's happening here?" Cassandra looked up at them, still cradling the injured cub. "This is going to sound impossible, but this mother bear has been taking care of Marcus. She found him when he was crying after his surgery, and she's been comforting him like he was her own cub." "But why?" Sophia asked, tears streaming down her face. "Why would a wild animal—" "Because she's a mother," Cassandra said simply. Her baby was trapped and hurt, and she was searching for him. When she found Marcus, something in her recognized a baby who needed comfort. She's been protecting him while we helped rescue her cub." The mother bear looked up at Sophia and David, and for a moment the room was filled with a tense silence. Then, incredibly, the bear made a soft chuffing sound and gently nuzzled Marcus's cheek before stepping aside slightly, as if inviting his parents to come closer. Sophia took a tentative step forward, then another. David followed, both of them moving slowly and carefully. When they reached the crib, they could see that Marcus was sleeping peacefully, his color better than it had been since his surgery. "He looks—" David started, then stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "He looks peaceful," Sophia whispered. "How long has she been here?" "About an hour," Cassandra replied. "And in that time, his vitals have been the best they've been since his surgery. She's been taking care of him, keeping him calm and comfortable." The cub in Cassandra's arms whimpered softly, and she knew they needed to get him to proper medical care soon. But first, she needed to address the impossible situation they all found themselves in. Sophia, David, I know this is overwhelming, but I need you to understand something. What happened here today, it's not just unusual, it's miraculous. This bear didn't just wander into the hospital. She came here because she was in pain, searching for her baby, and somehow she recognized that Marcus needed the same kind of comfort she would have given her own cub. Sophia reached out tentatively and touched Marcus's hand. He stirred slightly, opening his eyes and looking up at his mother. When he saw her, he smiled for the first time since his surgery. She was taking care of him, Sophia said, wonder in her voice. She was actually taking care of our baby. The mother bear watched this reunion with what could only be described as satisfaction. She had done what she set out to do. She had protected a baby who needed protection. And now she had her own baby back. But as Cassandra looked at the injured cub in her arms, she knew their challenges were far from over. The little animal needed immediate veterinary care, and the logistics of treating a wild bear cub while keeping his mother calm and managing the human parents were going to be complicated. "We need to get him to Dr. Martinez at the animal clinic," she told Jake. "But I don't think she's going to want to let him out of her sight again." "What are you suggesting?" Jake asked. Cassandra looked around the room, at the mother bear who had shown such incredible gentleness, at Marcus sleeping peacefully in his crib, at his parents who were staring at the scene with a mixture of fear and wonder, and at the injured cub who needed immediate help. "I'm suggesting that we figure out a way to help both families," she said, "because that's what they are now. A family." What happened next would test every protocol the hospital had ever established, challenge every assumption about the boundaries between human and animal care, and create a story that would be told for generations to come. But none of them could have predicted the media storm that was about to engulf them when Nurse Riley, curious about the commotion, pushed open the door and took a photo with her phone that would be shared around the world within hours. The flash from Riley's phone camera lit up the room like lightning, freezing everyone in place. The mother bear's head snapped toward the sound, her protective instincts immediately on high alert. For the first time since Cassandra had found her, the bear showed signs of agitation, a low growl rumbling in her chest as she positioned herself more defensively around both babies. "Riley, no!" Cassandra shouted, but it was too late. The damage was done. "Oh my God," Riley whispered, her phone still raised, finger hovering over the screen. "I'm sorry, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. A bear is actually—" "Put the phone away," David Thompson said sharply, surprising everyone with the authority in his voice. Despite his fear, his paternal instincts had kicked in. That flash scared her. "She's protecting our son." Riley quickly lowered her phone, but Cassandra could see the excitement in her eyes. She was already thinking about posting the photo, about the incredible story she had stumbled upon. The viral potential of an image showing a wild bear cuddling a hospital patient was astronomical. "Cassandra, I need you to listen to me very carefully," Cassandra said, her voice steady despite the chaos of emotions in her chest. "That photo cannot leave this room, not yet. Do you understand?" "But Dr. Vale, this is incredible. People need to see this. It's beautiful." "It's also dangerous," Jake interjected. "If this gets out before we can handle the situation properly, we'll have reporters, wildlife officials, and God knows who else descending on this hospital. That bear will be taken away, probably put down, and the cub will be separated from his mother." Sophia Thompson, who had been silent since the flash went off, suddenly spoke up. "She saved our baby," she said quietly. "Look at him, really look at him." Everyone in the room turned to look at Marcus, who despite all the commotion was still sleeping peacefully. His color was good, his breathing steady, and for the first time since his surgery he looked truly comfortable. "Before she came," Sophia continued, tears in her eyes. "Marcus was crying constantly. Nothing we did could comfort him. But look at him now. She gave him what we couldn't." The mother bear seemed to sense Sophia's words, or perhaps the emotion behind them. She looked at the young mother with those golden eyes and slowly, incredibly, she moved aside to allow Sophia better access to her son. Sophia approached carefully, her movements slow and non-threatening. When she reached the crib, she gently touched Marcus's forehead. He stirred and opened his eyes, looking up at his mother with a clarity and peace that had been absent since his surgery. "Thank you," Sophia whispered to the bear. "Thank you for taking care of him." The bear made a soft sound in response, almost like acknowledgement. The moment was so tender, so profound, that even Riley lowered her phone completely, seeming to understand that some things were too sacred to be captured casually. But the injured cub in Cassandra's arms was growing weaker. She could feel his breathing becoming more labored, and she knew they were running out of time. "We need to get him to Dr. Martinez immediately," she said. "But I have an idea. What if we bring the veterinarian here?" "Here?" Jake asked. "To the hospital? Why not?" "We're already breaking every rule in the book. Dr. Martinez has a mobile unit he uses for large animal calls. If we can get him here discreetly, he can treat the cub without separating him from his mother." David Thompson surprised everyone again by speaking up. "I'll call him. Dr. Martinez treated our farm animals when I was growing up. He's good people and he's discreet." While David made the call, moving to the far corner of the room to speak quietly, Cassandra found herself studying the dynamics in the room. The mother bear had positioned herself so she could watch over both her cub and Marcus simultaneously. Sophia was standing beside her son's crib, no longer afraid of the massive animal beside her. Even Riley seemed to have been affected by the scene, her initial excitement replaced by something deeper. "Dr. Martinez will be here in 20 minutes, David reported. "I told him it was an emergency involving a wildlife situation at the hospital. He didn't ask questions." 20 minutes. Cassandra looked at the cub in her arms, noting his increasingly shallow breathing. She made a decision that would have shocked her medical school professors. "Sophia, I need you to help me with something," she said. "I'm going to show you how to support his breathing while we wait." Sophia's eyes widened. "Me? But I'm not a doctor." "No, but you're a mother. And right now, that's more important." Cassandra carefully positioned the cub so Sophia could help support his chest, showing her how to gently encourage his breathing without putting pressure on his injured leg. The mother bear watched this interaction intently, and when Sophia's hands touched her baby, the bear made a soft sound that could only be interpreted as approval. "She trusts you," Cassandra observed with wonder. "She's allowing you to help care for her cub." As they worked together to keep the little bear comfortable, something remarkable happened. Marcus began to stir in his crib, making soft sounds that weren't cries of distress but rather gentle attempts at communication. The mother bear responded immediately, nuzzling his cheek and making her own soft sounds in return. "They're talking to each other," David said in amazement. "The baby and the bear, they're actually communicating." Jake moved to the window to watch for Dr. Martinez's arrival, but also to keep an eye on the situation outside. What he saw made his blood run cold. "Dr. Vale," he said urgently, "we have a problem. There's a news van in the parking lot." Cassandra's heart sank. How is that possible? "Riley, did you?" "I didn't post anything," Riley protested. "I swear, I just took the picture. I didn't share it with anyone." But as she spoke, her phone buzzed with a notification. Then another. Then a stream of them. She looked at the screen and her face went pale. "Oh no," she whispered. It automatically backed up to my cloud storage, and my sister has access to my photos. She must have seen it, and Riley's voice trailed off as she realized what had happened. How many people have seen it? Cassandra asked, though she dreaded the answer. Riley's fingers flew over her phone screen. It's everywhere. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. The caption says, "Breaking. Wild bear found cuddling baby in children's hospital." It already has thousands of shares. The sound of vehicles pulling into the parking lot could be heard through the open window. Jake's face was grim as he reported what he saw. 3 more news vans just arrived, and there's a truck from the Department of Wildlife. The mother bear sensed the change in atmosphere. Her ears perked up, and she began to show signs of stress, pacing slightly while keeping close to both babies. The injured cub whimpered, picking up on his mother's anxiety. "This is bad," Jake said. "If wildlife gets involved, they'll tranquilize her and take both bears away. They'll say it's for public safety." "Over my dead body," Sophia said fiercely, surprising everyone with her vehemence. "That bear saved my son's life. I'm not letting them take her away." David nodded in agreement. "Sophia's right, we need to protect them." Cassandra looked around the room at the unlikely alliance that had formed. A pediatric surgeon, a maintenance supervisor, a young mother and father, and a nurse who had accidentally started a media frenzy. And at the center of it all, a wild bear who had shown more compassion and healing power than any medication. "Okay," she said, her voice growing stronger with resolve. "Here's what we're going to do. Jake, can you lock down this wing? Block access to everyone except Dr. Martinez." "I can try, but hospital administration is going to have questions. Let me handle administration. Riley, I need you to call your sister and have her delete that post immediately. Tell her it was taken without permission and could endanger the animals." "But Dr. Vale, it's too late. It's already been shared thousands of times." "Then we control the narrative. We make sure people understand what really happened here." A knock at the door interrupted them. "Dr. Vale? This is Dr. Martinez. David Thompson called me about an emergency." Cassandra opened the door to admit a tall, silver-haired man carrying a large veterinary bag. Dr. Elena Martinez had been practicing veterinary medicine in the mountains for over 30 years, and she had seen everything. But even she stopped short when she saw the scene in the room. "Well," she said after a moment, her voice calm and professional, "this is certainly a first." The mother bear studied the new arrival carefully, but she didn't show aggression. Something about Dr. Martinez's calm demeanor and gentle movements seemed to reassure her. Cassandra explained, carefully transferring the small animal to the veterinarian. "The cub has a broken leg and possible dehydration. He was trapped in construction debris for several hours." Dr. Martinez examined the cub with practiced hands, her movements slow and deliberate to avoid startling the mother bear. "Clean break of the tibia, painful, but treatable. He's definitely dehydrated, but his vital signs are stable." "Can you treat him here?" Sophia asked, "without taking him away from his mother?" Dr. Martinez looked around the room, taking in the full situation. The bear protecting both her cub and the human baby. The parents who were clearly invested in the animal's welfare, and the medical equipment that could support treatment. "It's unconventional," she said slowly. "But yes, I think we can manage it. I'll need to sedate him to set the leg, but I can do that here. The real challenge will be keeping him here for recovery. A bear cub needs several weeks to heal from a break like this." "Several weeks?" Cassandra asked. "Is that even possible?" Before Dr. Martinez could answer, the sound of raised voices and footsteps in the hallway reached them. Jake moved to the door and looked out through the small window. "Wildlife officers," he reported grimly. 3 of them, and they're armed with tranquilizer guns. Hospital security is with them, and they're heading this way. The mother bear's reaction was immediate. She sensed the threat approaching and positioned herself more aggressively in front of both babies, her hackles rising slightly. A low growl rumbled in her chest. "They're going to take her," Sophia said, panic in her voice. "They're going to tranquilize her and take both bears away." Cassandra looked at the bear, who was now fully alert and defensive. She thought about everything that had happened, the incredible gentleness the bear had shown, the way she had comforted Marcus when human medicine couldn't, the bond that had formed between species in this small hospital room. "Not if I have anything to say about it," she said firmly. The footsteps stopped outside their door, and an authoritative voice called out, "This is Officer Rebecca Chen with the Department of Wildlife. We need immediate access to this room. We've received reports of dangerous wild animals in the hospital." Cassandra took a deep breath and made a decision that would change everything. She opened the door just wide enough to step into the hallway, closing it behind her to shield the scene inside. "Officer Chen," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Dr. Cassandra Vale, head of pediatric surgery. I need to speak with you about the situation before you enter this room." Officer Chen was a compact woman in her 40s with the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who had dealt with wildlife emergencies for years. Behind her stood 2 male officers, both holding tranquilizer rifles at the ready. "Dr. Vale, we've received reports and seen photos of a wild bear in a patient room with a child. This is an extremely dangerous situation that needs to be resolved immediately." "I understand your concerns," Cassandra said calmly, "but I need you to know that what you've heard may not be the complete story. Before you take any action, will you allow me to explain what actually happened here?" Officer Chen studied her face, noting the calm determination in her eyes. "You have 2 minutes, Doctor, but if there's any immediate threat to human life, we're going in." Cassandra nodded and began to tell the story. The crying baby, the desperate mother bear searching for her lost cub, the incredible gentleness and protective instincts that had led to the most unusual medical scenario of her career. As she spoke, she could see the officers' expressions changing from skepticism to amazement to something approaching wonder. When she finished, Officer Chen was quiet for a long moment. "Dr. Vale, what you're describing, it's unprecedented. I've never heard of a wild bear showing this kind of behavior toward a human child. I know how it sounds, but Officer Chen, that baby's vital signs improved dramatically when the bear began caring for him. She's not a threat, she's been a healing presence." Officer Chen looked at her colleagues, then back at Cassandra. "Even if what you're saying is true, Doctor, we can't leave a wild bear in a hospital. There are protocols, safety regulations." "What if there was another way?" Cassandra asked. "What if we could ensure everyone's safety while allowing the bears to stay together during the cub's recovery?" Before Officer Chen could respond, the door behind Cassandra opened slightly, and Sophia Thompson stepped out. Her face was streaked with tears, but her voice was steady. "Officer, please," she said. "That bear saved my son's life. She gave him comfort when nothing else could. She's not dangerous. She's a mother protecting babies. Both of them." Officer Chen looked between the 2 women, and for the first time since arriving, she seemed uncertain about the proper course of action. "This is highly irregular," she said finally, "but let me see the situation for myself. If there's any sign of aggression, any threat to human safety, we're tranquilizing the bears immediately." Cassandra nodded and slowly opened the door to room 314. What Officer Chen saw inside would challenge everything she thought she knew about wildlife behavior, and force her to make a decision that would either become legendary or end her career. Inside the room, Dr. Martinez was quietly setting up her equipment while the mother bear watched protectively. Marcus was awake in his crib, reaching out his tiny hands toward the bear, who was gently nuzzling his fingers. David Thompson stood beside his wife, his hand on her shoulder, both of them watching the impossible scene with expressions of wonder and gratitude. And in the center of it all, the injured bear cub lay peacefully in a makeshift bed of hospital blankets, his mother's enormous paw resting gently beside him as she watched over both her own baby and the human child who had somehow become part of her family. The room was filled with such profound peace and love that Officer Chen found herself holding her breath, afraid to break the spell. This wasn't a dangerous wildlife situation. This was something she had never seen before in 20 years of wildlife management. This was a miracle. Officer Chen stepped fully into the room, her colleagues following behind her with their tranquilizer rifles lowered. The mother bear looked at them with those intelligent golden eyes, assessing the new threat, but she didn't move aggressively. Instead, she seemed to understand that these humans, like the others, were here to help. In 20 years of wildlife management, Officer Chen said softly, I have never seen anything like this. Dr. Martinez looked up from where she was preparing to sedate the injured cub. Officer, I need to treat this animal's broken leg. With your permission, I'd like to do it here, where his mother can see him and stay calm. Officer Chen studied the scene. The peaceful baby, the protective but gentle bear, the parents who clearly trusted this wild animal with their child's life, and the injured cub who needed immediate medical attention. This goes against every protocol I've ever learned, she said finally. But sometimes you have to trust what you see with your own eyes instead of what's written in a manual. She turned to her colleagues. Stand down, we're going to monitor the situation, but we're not separating this family. The relief in the room was palpable. Sophia Thompson began to cry again, but this time they were tears of joy. David wrapped his arm around his wife, both of them watching as Dr. Martinez began her work on the bear cub. The mother bear seemed to understand that the veterinarian was helping her baby. She watched every movement with intense focus, but she didn't interfere. When Dr. Martinez administered the sedative and the cub's eyes began to close, the mother bear made a soft whining sound and gently nuzzled his head. It's okay, Mama, Dr. Martinez said softly. He's just sleeping so I can fix his leg. He'll wake up feeling much better. As if she understood the words, the bear settled down beside the makeshift bed, keeping one paw near her cub while maintaining her protective watch over Marcus. Outside, the media had gathered in full force. News crews from across the state were arriving, drawn by the viral video that showed a wild bear cuddling a hospital patient. But inside room 314, a different kind of story was unfolding. Dr. Martinez worked with practiced skill, setting the cub's broken leg and wrapping it in a small cast. Throughout the procedure, the mother bear never moved from her position, watching over both babies with equal devotion. The break was clean, Doctor, Martinez announced as she finished. He'll need about 6 weeks to heal completely, but he should make a full recovery. 6 weeks? Cassandra repeated. Can he stay here for 6 weeks? Officer Chen stepped forward. Actually, I have an idea about that. There's a wildlife rehabilitation center about an hour from here. They have facilities that could accommodate both bears during the cub's recovery. But... She paused, looking at Marcus in his crib. I've never seen anything like the bond this bear has formed with your son. It would be a shame to break that connection if it's helping him heal. Sophia and David exchanged a look. What are you suggesting? Sophia asked. What if we found a way for both families to stay together during the recovery period? The Rehabilitation Center has guest facilities for families of patients. It's unconventional, but then again, everything about this situation is unconventional. Dr. Cassandra Vale felt tears welling up in her eyes as she realized what Officer Chen was proposing. You mean, let the Thompsons stay at the Wildlife Center so Marcus can continue to receive comfort from the bear while her cub heals? It would require a lot of coordination between our departments, the hospital, and the rehabilitation center. We'd need to monitor both the human and animal patients carefully, but if everyone is willing... Officer Chen looked around the room at the faces filled with hope and love. Yes, Sophia said immediately. If it means keeping them together, if it means our son can continue to heal with her help, then yes. David nodded vigorously. Whatever it takes, she saved our boy's life. Over the next hour, phone calls were made, arrangements discussed, and protocols bent in ways they'd never been bent before. The media outside clamored for interviews, but the people in room 314 were focused on something more important than fame or publicity. They were focused on love. On the miraculous bond that had formed between a grieving mother bear and a sick human baby. On the power of compassion to cross species lines and create healing that no medicine could match. As the afternoon sun streamed through the windows, casting golden light across the room, the bear cub began to wake up from his surgery. His mother immediately moved closer, making soft sounds of comfort and reassurance. The little cub's eyes opened, and seeing his mother, he made a weak but happy sound. Marcus, who had been watching the whole scene with his wide baby eyes, suddenly let out a giggle. It was the first time he had laughed since his surgery, and the sound filled the room with pure joy. The mother bear looked at the laughing baby, then at his parents, then at all the humans who had helped save her cub. In that moment, something passed between them all, a recognition, a gratitude, an understanding that transcended words. 6 weeks later, the story had a very different ending than anyone could have predicted. At Pine Valley Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, a small miracle continued to unfold every day. Marcus Thompson, now fully recovered from his surgery, spent his days playing in a specially designed space where he could safely interact with the bear family that had become his unlikely guardians. The mother bear, whom the staff had named Grace, watched over Marcus with the same devotion she showed her own cub, now named Hope. The little bear's leg had healed perfectly, and he and Marcus had become the most unusual playmates anyone had ever seen. Sophia and David Thompson had taken extended leave from their jobs to stay at the center during the recovery period. What had started as a medical necessity had become something none of them wanted to end. "Look at them," Sophia said to Dr. Vale, who had come to visit her most unusual former patients. Marcus was sitting in the grass, carefully petting Hope's fur while Grace watched protectively nearby. The baby's laughter echoed across the rehabilitation center, a sound of pure happiness that had become commonplace over the past 6 weeks. "I've never seen anything like it," Dr. Vale admitted. "The bond they've formed, it's changed everything I thought I knew about healing, about medicine, about what's possible when love is involved." The story of the bear who climbed into a hospital bed to comfort a sick baby had indeed gone viral around the world. But more than that, it had changed lives. The Pine Valley Hospital had established a new program studying the healing effects of animal-human bonds. Officer Chen had become an advocate for alternative wildlife management approaches. Dr. Martinez had started a mobile veterinary service specifically for unusual animal-human situations. And the Thompson family had learned that sometimes the most profound healing comes from the most unexpected sources. As the sun began to set over the rehabilitation center, Grace gently nudged Marcus toward his parents, then settled down with Hope for their evening rest. The baby reached out one small hand toward the bear, and she carefully touched it with her nose in their now familiar goodbye ritual. "Will you miss them when it's time to release Grace and Hope back to the wild?" Dr. Vale asked. Sophia smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "Of course we will, but Grace taught us something important. Love isn't about holding on. It's about giving what someone needs, even if it means letting go." David nodded, picking up his son, who was now babbling happily about his day with his bear friends. "She saved our boy's life, not just medically but emotionally. She showed him, showed all of us, that healing comes in many forms." Officer Chen, who had also come for the visit, watched the scene with satisfaction. "The remarkable thing is that Grace could be released tomorrow if she wanted. The rehabilitation center has opened her enclosure. She's free to leave any time, but she chooses to stay." "Why?" Dr. Vale asked. "Because," Chen said simply, "she understands that some bonds are worth more than freedom. She knows Marcus still needs her, just like she needed to save him that first day." As they prepared to leave that evening, Sophia knelt down beside Grace one more time. The bear looked at her with those wise golden eyes, and Sophia whispered, "Thank you. Thank you for showing us what love really looks like." Grace made that soft, rumbling sound she had made that first morning in the hospital room, and gently touched Sophia's hand with her paw. It was a goodbye, but not a final one. It was a promise that the bond they had formed would last forever, even when the time came for Grace and Hope to return to their wild home. The story that had begun with a desperate mother bear searching for her lost cub had become something much larger. It had become a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of maternal love, and the miraculous connections that can form when hearts recognize each other across all boundaries. And in a small hospital room in Pine Valley, where this impossible story had begun, a plaque now hung on the wall. It read simply, "Sometimes the greatest healing comes from the most unexpected places. In memory of Grace and Hope, who taught us that love knows no boundaries." The bear, who climbed into a hospital bed to comfort a sick baby, had done more than save one child's life. She had opened hearts, changed minds, and proven that in a world often divided by differences, love remains the most powerful force of all. Marcus Thompson grew up knowing that he had been loved by a bear, that his first steps toward healing had been guided by a wild mother's gentle paws, and somewhere in the Cascade Mountains, a bear family roamed free, carrying with them the memory of a tiny human baby who had helped heal their own broken hearts. It was a story that would be told for generations, a reminder that miracles don't always come in the forms we expect, but they come when we need them most. And sometimes, just sometimes, they come wearing fur and carrying enough love to heal the world.